I was browsing through the clothing aisle in Walmart, hunched over a rack of summer dresses, when I felt the prickling sensation of being watched. It was an ordinary afternoon, with shoppers milling about, the sound of a nearby child crying cutting through the monotonous chatter. Focusing on the bright colors around me, I sifted through the fabrics, hoping to find something that would lift my spirit. That's when I noticed him out of the corner of my eye, a middle-aged man with prison tattoos snaking up his arms. He stood a few racks away, his intense gaze fixed on me. I awkwardly pretended to be engrossed in selecting a dress, though the unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach grew heavier. At first I tried to brush it off. Maybe he wasn't looking at me. Perhaps he was just another shopper. But as I moved further down the aisle, my instincts screamed that he had followed me. I glanced back, and sure enough, he was now 2 steps closer, eyes expression unreadable. Heart racing, I turned on my heel and briskly walked toward the toy section. Maybe I could blend in with the giggling children, an aisle full of colorful action figures. Pulling out my phone, I feigned a conversation with my husband, hoping to subtly signal my distress. Hey, honey. Yeah, I just found a cute dress for summer. I chattered loudly, casting quick looks over my shoulder. The man was still lurking, inching closer, his eyes fixed on my back, unyielding. I quickened my pace, weaving through displays, desperate to shake him off. Yet every time I looked back, he was right there, an ominous shadow in the busy store, his presence suffocating. I could see the other shoppers, but for some reason no one else noticed or cared about the tension brewing in the air. After what felt like an eternity, I finally reached the cash register. My heart pounded as I approached the cashier, a young woman with a warm smile. I leaned in, trying to keep my voice steady. Excuse me, but there's a man following me. I really need help. The cashier's smile faded, replaced by concern. We'll take care of this, she replied, beckoning to a nearby employee. The other employee, a tall man with a protective demeanor, rushed over, and the cashier quickly explained the situation. As they offered to walk me to my car, I felt a mix of relief and tension. What was it about that man that sent shivers down my spine? I grabbed my purse tightly, every instinct urging me to stay alert. As the employee guided me toward the exit, I cast a final glance at the aisles, searching for that familiar figure. And then I saw him standing further back, his eyes locking onto mine. Once outside, I felt the cold air hit me like a jolt, but the warmth of the day seemed distant. I hurried to my car, the employee by my side. I fumbled with my keys, keeping one eye on the doorway of Walmart, half expecting the man to burst through, while the other watched the employee assuring me of my safety. When I finally got into my car and slammed the door shut, a wave of relief washed over me. The employee stood at a distance, ensuring I was okay before retreating, but as I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror, my breath hitching at the sight of the man standing still at the entrance, tattooed arms crossed over his chest, watching me leave. I was safe for now, but I knew this wouldn't be the last time I saw him. My mind raced with questions. Why was he following me? What did he want? Later that night, I locked my doors, not able to shake the feeling of unease. I couldn't forget his eyes, the way they seemed to stare right through me. Perhaps I would never know his intentions, but I realized Walmart wasn't just a store. It had transformed into a theater of terror, and I was the lead role in a play I wished I could escape. It's a quiet Wednesday afternoon, the kind of day when the light filtering through the large windows of Walmart's electronics section casts long shadows on the aisles. As I stroll through the labyrinth of displays filled with TVs, gadgets, and gaming consoles, my heart is set on finding the perfect gaming computer. I've been saving for months, and I'm eager to grab something that will truly elevate my gaming experience. I pause in front of a sleek gaming rig when I catch sight of him, a heavy-set shorter man with glasses and a beard that looks like it hasn't seen soap in weeks. His clothing is rumpled, his fingers stained from who knows what. The back of my mind whispers to keep my distance, but before I know it, he's right next to me, staring at the computer. Nice choice, kid, he rasps, his voice a gravelly undertone. This one's got the GTX 3080, perfect for all those heavy games you love. I nod, trying to keep my demeanor casual. Yeah, I've heard good things. Just trying to decide if it's really worth the price. Oh, it is. You don't want to cheap out on something you'll be using for years. You a gamer? The smell of smoke and unwashed fabric wafts towards me as he leans in closer and I subtly step back. Yeah, I dabble, mostly online stuff. His eyes light up with an enthusiasm that's disconcerting. Says that he poses a threat. the way he lingers, refusing to back off. I move toward the front of the store, glancing for a staff member or an officer, but the place looks empty. Panic bubbles inside me as I think of all the horror stories I've heard of shoppers vanishing from crowded places. Suddenly I spot a uniformed officer walking past, and I can't help but shout, "Officer!" The man stops in his tracks, his expression shifting to one of simmering frustration as I break away from him. The officer turns, eyes darting between us. "What's going on?" Hesk's brow furrowed. I lock eyes with the bearded man for a moment. There's something in his gaze that sends a chill down my spine. Something dark and unfathomable. The officer steps toward me and I feel like I can finally breathe again. The weight of being followed lifts, if only a little, as the man's demeanor shifts from passive to hostile, as he realizes the officer is now involved. Nothing, I was just browsing. I stammer, trying to gather my thoughts, but the urgency of my situation spills out, desperate to be heard. He's been following me. I don't know why, but my voice trails off as I glance back, only to find the aisle empty. The heavy-set man has vanished, leaving me feeling more unsettled than ever.
I worked a graveyard shift for a very long time. One night about 25 years ago, I had caught up with my night's work, but was unable to back up the work that I had done. I decided to clock out and drive to Walmart to buy a box of new discs and leave the receipt for our bookkeeper, so she could reimburse me. A few days after this incident, we learned that our computer had a virus that was corrupting the floppy disks that we were using. So, you get the picture. Floppy disks for the backup, no cell phones for most of us. It was a primitive time. I arrived at Walmart about 3 a.m., went in and found the discs. I decided to visit the toy department, as it was early November and I wanted to get Christmas gift ideas for my son, as well as several nieces and nephews. While I browsed, I felt someone watching me. I looked around, and there were 3 men nearby, and all were just staring at me. I looked back at them long enough to fix their appearance in my mind, and went on looking at toys. I was in no hurry. I was off the clock, and wouldn't need much time to head back up after my work, after I got to the office. So I continued to look around, even strolled through some housewares for a few minutes. Every time I looked over my shoulder, those 3 guys were close by, and watching me. After the second time, alarms were sounding in my head. They were repellent looking, with pasty pale faces, as if they spent all of their time indoors, eating junk food, and their eyes were cold and hard. What disturbed me the most was the way that they were dressed. Much too warmly for the weather that night, even though it was November. It was about 55 degrees outside. I was perfectly comfortable in a jean jacket. These guys were in heavy coats, suitable for sub-freezing temperatures, and they had them buttoned to their neck inside of the store. The only reason I could think of for that was that they were hiding weapons beneath these coats. I finally headed towards the cash registers, thinking that if no one else was leaving the store when I did, I would ask the cashier to call security and request an escort to my vehicle. As I reached the register, I saw my stalkers standing just inside the doors. They muttered among themselves for a moment, then they exited the store. As I was paying, a man and woman lined up behind me. I had seen them shortly before I neared the register, and they didn't seem to be paying any attention to me. I moved to the area between the registers and the door and stood waiting for the couple, fiddling with my buttons, blowing my nose. When they moved towards the doors, so did I, staying just a few steps ahead of them. I had parked not far outside, and I reached my vehicle relatively quickly. The stalkers were sitting in a car that was parked nose to nose with my pickup truck. I hopped in, locked the doors, then sat back and stared at them. The couple I had used as my unwitting escorts walked past me and the stalkers, and just got into a car a few spaces away. They left. After a minute or two, the stalker driver said something to the others, started the engine, and pulled away. I watched as they slowly left the parking lot, then ascended the nearby interstate highway overpass and took the entrance ramp. Only then did I start my engine. I took my time looking around as the engine warmed up. I continued along the street for a couple of miles past the interstate, then pulled into a dark lot behind a strip mall, turned off my lights and my engine, and then waited, watching the few vehicles that had passed me. I wanted to be certain that I would not lead those guys to my office building, which was isolated, and at that hour, usually deserted, except for me. After my pulse slowed to normal, I restarted the truck and returned to work. I'm a female, but I'm almost 6 feet tall and weigh about 175 pounds. I know that my size has protected me from a lot of mayhem over the years. I was also armed that night. I carried a loaded Smith & Wesson .357 revolver, as well as a speed loader, which is like an extra cylinder full of bullets. Still, I probably would have been no match for those 3 determined assailants. This experience has cured me of my nonchalant about running errands in the wee hours, and validated my conviction that any time I get the feeling of someone's eyes crawling over me, it's wise to look around and find that reason. About 3 months later, my husband and I were watching the local evening news. They showed photos of 2 of the stalkers. They were wanted for armed robbery. So, career criminals who stalked me in Walmart one night, let's not meet ever again. A few days ago, I decided to go to Walmart to pick up a few things. That day I was wearing a bright dress with sunflowers printed on it. I wore my hair down, which is also a brighter blonde color. As I was shopping, I went down the international aisle to grab Murrin. As I walked down, I felt eyes on me. I stood in front of the shelf stocked with different sauces and condiments, looking for Murrin, when a guy came so close to me that I had to look at him. The moment that we locked eyes, he smiled and said, "Hi, how are you?" I instantly felt uneasy, so I said nothing, smiled at him, and then walked away. There's no particular reason the man made me feel uneasy. He looked just fine. He looked like he was in his early to mid-30s, maybe a few inches taller than me, around 5'8", had brown hair. His dirty orange cut-off shirt and brown boots made me think that he was in construction, but who knows? All I know is that he was weird in a way that I can't put my finger on. After I walked away, I went to the complete opposite end of the store and kept looking around. He was nowhere to be found for the next 20 minutes or so that I shopped, so I thought that I was just overreacting. I started heading towards the checkout area, and once I got to the lines, I saw him standing right next to the refrigerators next to the checkout, staring at me. He had one item in his hand, so after he made eye contact, he walked towards the self-checkout area. I did a 180-degree turn and headed for the longest aisle that I could find, thinking that I could wait him out. It took about 20 minutes to get through checkout, and I dragged my feet walking out of the store, making sure that the guy wasn't waiting for me in the store. With him nowhere to be seen, I picked up the pace once I got outside. I started to think that I was being irrational. He wasn't unattractive. He gave off no signs of actually being dangerous. I must be crazy, right? Walking towards my car, I saw a brown worker's truck waiting close to the exit. I started to drive around the parking lot once I stepped out of the store. I didn't think much of this truck at the time because I had thought that the guy had just left. And at that point, I just wanted to get to my car because it was raining. I finished packing my trunk when this same truck started to pull through the spot diagonal of mine, slowly inching into the spot right next to the car, so that my driver's side was right next to the truck's driver's side door. I heard the guy's voice say, "Excuse me," as I opened my car door. I quickly slid in, hoping that I could just get away from him thinking that I didn't hear him. I locked the door, turned on the car, and quickly turned it into reverse. I started pulling out, but before I could get far, the brown truck pulled forward and moved diagonally right behind my car so that I couldn't back up without hitting his car entirely. I looked in front of me and realized with a car in front of me, there was no way that I was going to just drive out of there with no issues. I turned my head and saw the guy sitting in his truck with his window rolled down. I decided to roll down my window and ask him what's up in a hostile tone. He began, "I just saw you in the store, and you are absolutely so beautiful. I just had to tell you." "Oh, thank you," I said, praying he didn't get out of his vehicle. "I couldn't let myself walk away without asking for your number, so that I can take you out sometime," he had told me. I picked up my hand with my wedding ring and told him that I'm married. As he began to respond, I rolled up my window and stared at my steering wheel, waiting for him to move his truck. I couldn't stand to look in his direction, because I felt his eyes on me. So after what seemed like the longest minute, I heard him finally move his truck. I peeled out of there in a heartbeat. The guy might have had great intentions. He might have even been genuine, but I got a dark and heavy vibe that didn't sit right with him. So guy at Walmart who blocked me into my spot to ask me out, let's not meet again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.